Call to order the Curriculum and Student Development Committee of the Madison Board of Education. That committee is comprised of Mary Ann Connolly and Kathy Miller and myself, Stephen Penn. And at this point, we'll turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Gail Dowling-Hinch, to introduce the items on our agenda. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Penn. Pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you so much for your attendance as well. I appreciate it. It's always just the best committee ever. Tonight we have two agenda items, both very interesting. The first agenda item is actually in response to our last board meeting, where there were some questions about the overview for grade 9 unit 3 ELA. And in fact, we have a great kind of orientation to that unit for you this evening, as well as made some reflections in the overview of really truly all of the titles that are represented in that unit. So more of a balanced perspective, which I know was of interest to the board. So we'll talk about that tonight. Selena De Silva is here to delve deeply into that content. And then we'll follow that with a little learning experience about virtual reality and its use at Folsom Middle School with Paige as well. So
Are we gonna be able to do it?
oh yeah. Oh yeah, we have
We're all set up.
It's set up in the next room. So after the meeting, you can
Oh my
bring up.
gosh.
It's not made for televised moments, so
It's okay.
I have
I'll be
to,
done if I'm doing it.
I'm really glad I'm not following your act
Oh.
because there's nothing I could say unless I was, jumping up and down would be as exciting as VR. Right, yeah, I'm not gonna go into labor.
So I'd like to thank Selena for being here in her present state. And actually Paige is a new mother. She's got a baby at home as well.
Congratulations.
11-year-old. And then I also want to recognize Don Fiorelli, who's in our audience tonight. And Dawn is here in support, library media specialist. So of course she is heavily involved in both topics for this evening and does a lot of work with both our English department and also our library media specialist. So thank you, Dawn, for being here. Selena, I'm going to get up and be your Vanna. Why don't you take it over and I'll do some flipping.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, good evening. Is it still afternoon or evening? I'm not. 5:30 is definitely evening when you're 9 months pregnant. I want to thank you for having me in today just to provide a little bit more context. And I know that whatever I share with you guys, I know that you'll be able to share it with the larger Board of Education, and I appreciate that. I wanted to just start today kind of discussing just the purpose of book clubs. It's been a while since we've had to have like a true pedagogical conversation about how we structure literacy at the upper levels, especially at the high school, and just the purpose of why we structure our units to include book clubs. I won't go into every single bullet point under these, but we really do this to provide choice, to support growing independence, to assess for transfer and do some of that guided practice, to move beyond the canon and to develop those inquiry skills. Book clubs are one of our biggest, I say free choice, even though it's limited choice. Kids really get to choose the books that they're interested in reading, and having the ability to choose the books that they are genuinely interested in knowing more about helps them with those inquiry skills. And there's a lot of research aligned with book clubs that shows that it's a really great way to develop intrinsic inquiry. It also gives the teacher a moment to kind of like step out from in front of the classroom and let the kids guide their learning. And they act as guides by the side. So when I typically do book clubs with my honor students, I am giving them a mix of contemporary novels and canon. And I say it's like a scavenger hunt. I'm going to tell you what to look for and what's important, but it's your job to figure out where it is and why it's important. And it just furthers that approach that I'm gonna teach you how to do something, then we're all gonna do it together so that you can eventually do it independently.
And this
Sure.
has been on my mind for a while, so, because we talked about the list of books.
Yes.
Which I know you haven't got to yet. Are they, in a book club, even though they have a recommended list,
Mhm.
can they pick any book that they would wanna read, or does it have to be within that scope of,
I've had
if they have an
many,
interest, you know,
Yeah.
say they have an interest in, I don't know,
it would
automobile.
really depend on, if they have someone else within the classroom that they want to read a particular book with. I can't imagine I'd have a single teacher who would say, no, you can't read the book that you want to.
Okay.
Unless it truly just kind of diverges from the intent of the unit. So for example, the intent of this unit is to develop and analyze theme. If a kid came to one of my teachers and said, I want to read this very nonfiction factual book,
Mhm.
it'd be really hard to develop those skills.
Okay.
But does that mean that they can't choose, like, for example, most of the reading adults do is nonfiction reading. So we do want to develop that love of narrative nonfiction or the ability to read nonfiction and enjoy nonfiction. So if a student came to one of my teachers and said, hey, I really like this book, it's a narrative piece, I can analyze theme, I can analyze the author as a character in the text, it would totally work with the skills that we're
Which in
developing.
most fiction books,
1,000%.
it's a book
Yeah.
report.
Right,
When I grew up, you know,
Yeah.
that was when you had the theme, you had the
exactly.
middle and the end, you know.
Yeah, so,
That being said, I just wanna underscore, like, the purpose of book clubs is very clearly tied to the learning that we need
Yes.
to do in the unit.
Yeah.
So the learning is the priority
Right.
and the book is a vehicle. So we're not teaching the book, we're teaching the skill of the unit.
So give me a for instance of that. I guess that's, you know, when I think of reading a book and doing a book report,
Mhm.
when your themes are such as,
So, you know, it depends on the book, obviously. The ultimate purpose of what we're trying to do is trying to get them to trying to get students to be able to identify the author's intended message of the book, so why they wrote the book, and ultimately express to us how that is transferred within the book. So it could be through characters, it could be through conflict, it could be through transformation or character development. But it truly depends on the book, and it depends on the student's interpretation of the book. So there's rarely one right answer. There's a variety of right
and you wouldn't
answers.
know really the intent of the author unless you knew the author.
Correct,
and
yeah,
knew why
and we
he
can
was
do
writing.
background research, like for
Right, right.
example,
But
we
you don't
read
always know.
The Great Gatsby, and there's gonna be a lot of research, or there's going to be a lot of professional literary critics who will research and analyze a book for that message. So sometimes we, especially as we elevate our courses and get into more advanced or honors placements, we do start to consider what are the experts saying about why this author wrote it. Right now, freshman year, it's really just how can we move beyond like lessons and morals, like you should be nice to everyone. We want something a little more nuanced than that.
I was gonna talk about that too, like the level of the book and the complexity of the book has to also be appropriate for the work of the unit.
Yeah. So this was the original overview, that kind of just had a list of, some of the text that we used with the et cetera. It kind of lacked, more background on how we choose the books and why we choose the books. So if you want to go to the next slide, that was what you were familiar with. What is highlighted are the changes that I've made to the overview or the proposed changes. What's in italics and not highlighted are the things that, were kept the same. So really what I've tried to do, instead of just, it's almost like throwing spaghetti on a wall and saying, here's a bunch of book titles. I try to organize it in a way that allows for students to also make more informed choices. So I tried to make 3 categories, which is thematically relevant, so something similar to Just Mercy. So say a kid is maybe really liked the book and they want to read something like that. I have a list of titles that are very similar to our core novel. I also have one where a category that's just easy access to theme. So maybe a student is struggling to name a theme or develop a theme. I wanted something that gave them a more direct access to craft that theme. And then finally, just teens like to read about people like themselves. So I had a category where it was just life as a teen, where it's characters who are dealing with similar instances that a freshman might be dealing with, the ages are similar, and they're dealing with similar situations. Now, within those three categories, I also tried to rank them in terms of complexity. So our freshman course is unleveled, but the next year that kids would enter would be American literature, which can be a college prep course or an honors course. So I wanted to give some options that were more challenging, and we'll, if you want to go to the next slide, that might be, and I might flip back to the other one. So we have a row where it's a challenge, a book that might be a little bit more challenging to read, in terms of not necessarily the content, but really just the context. So we know that To Kill a Mockingbird can be a little bit of a burden for modern day teenagers just because of the syntax and the language. Then I have a row where it's just on grade level, so books appropriate for a freshman, a typical freshman. And then I have a row where it's just very highly engaging. So these might be books that have less words on the page. They might be easier to read in terms of like syntax and sentence complexity, but they are highly engaging, and it helps to motivate our more reluctant readers. If we want to go back to the previous slide, the other information that I tried to add is that book clubs really do rely on student choice. Most of my teachers will provide the titles, give some background, and then ask, give me your top 3 choices. And we really try to give them their first 2, unless they're the only kid in the room who like wants to read that one book. And we usually check with them and say, hey, I can't give you this first choice, but this second choice, is this something that you're interested in, or do you want to maybe select a different title? So we do give them a lot of choice. When we do make these book selections, there's a lot of information and a lot of research that goes into making sure that these books are appropriate. We typically will buy a copy and then one of our teachers will read it, or multiple. If you're like me and you went from middle school to high school, you read all of them in a summer to prepare. We also work closely with the library media specialists who will have access to professional resources like reviews. And we also get student feedback. If there's a really popular title and it fits, we will buy a copy, read it, and then if it's appropriate, we will offer it. So we try to give as many options based on informed decisions.
So you only need 2 students to want to read the same book.
Yeah, I had a book partnership,
Right.
and it's so rare that it's just 2 kids.
Yeah.
Usually when they make their first, second, and third choice, and none of my kids would ever watch this, but they would be like, oh, she knows. They're usually saying, what books did you put down for your first 3 choices? Oh, those are the same ones that I'm gonna do, because they want to read books that they like with their friends. That's the teenage beast. So within the overview, I hyperlinked this. It's also a document that kind of will live on its own. These are just the options, and these are options that we've had for this unit that have come and gone, or some years there are books that are more popular, and then some years like no one will choose, for example, Every Day by David Levithan, but there might be a year where you have 2 different clubs in one class. So I tried to break it down, like I said, by kind of like thematic concepts, like theme, great for tracking theme, life as a teen, and by complexity. And then in green, next to some of the titles, you'll see that there's like age numbers, or NA. And what I did was I looked at the website Common Sense Media, which typically is has a more conservative approach or outlook. Yeah, parental outlook on some of these titles, just to give context of, you know, what are other people saying about the age appropriateness of these titles. Not that that's a one and done type of piece of information, but it's nice to consider both lexile level, complexity level, and then what people are saying. And even within that website will say, you know, this one might be a little bit more challenging for a reader because there might be like an instance of violence. For example, Purple Heart, which is in the second category in highly engaging, that talks about some wartime. And so that is actually 15 plus because it's providing descriptions of something that might happen in war. But I also know that I have tons of teenagers who are very interested in that. So it would be a conversation, hey, you know, there might be some pretty triggering instances in this book, but if you're okay with that, it's not ever going, it's still 15 plus. We've got kids who are freshmen who are turning 15. So a lot of these books, beyond the very classic texts like Catch-22 or Lord of the Flies, for the most part, they are appropriate for kids younger than our freshmen.
So what is the NA then?
So that was not one that was available as a review on Common Sense Media.
Yeah.
Correct. All right, you can get to the next slide. And because I just like to keep my finger on the pulse of what other places are doing, there's oftentimes where I'm in contact with other communities or communities reach out to us about curriculum. I was just interested, what do they have listed on their curriculum websites or within their program of studies? And from what I saw, a lot of the core novels, those canon novels like To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, Lord of the Flies, are being used widely in both Derg A and Derg B. Now, The Curious Incident of a Dog in the Nighttime, that is one that's slowly becoming like a modern classic. And that was pretty prevalent across Derg B. And I just found out the title is a callback to Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I learned that last night. And then the next slide is some of the titles that I found across other district documents. For example, the title Monster in The Giver is used in Fairfield. The Glass Castle, Speak and Staying Fat for Sarah Burns is used in Glastonbury. Canton also uses The Glass Castle, and Simsbury is using Speak, Salt to the Sea, and Dare Martin. So these might not be directly like full class novels, which a lot of English courses are still using. They might be on suggested summer reading lists, which I wanted to highlight because at least with our books, we provide some support for our students when they're reading things so that if there is something challenging, we can kind of talk them through and help them understand the context of the story. To just send a kid home with summer reading and maybe not have a support system, I would rather have them read with people that care deeply about them to support them should they encounter something that just they're like, oh man, that was a tough chapter. You can go to the next slide. I also just wanted to highlight briefly that I believe thoroughly in the transparency of our curriculum and our curriculum documents, and I was blown away at what little information I saw in some of our comparable districts. And I want to make it a point that we continue to be transparent as possible so that we maintain a level of professionalism and dignity and strength within our curriculum. There are some districts that will just have, you know, here's our curriculum document, it's mainly their philosophy, or it's just their program of studies. I'm very proud of the fact that we try to be as transparent as possible for both our Board of Education, our subcommittees, and the community at large.
And these books are, the parents are able to They can go online
They can go online. I often, and I've had a couple people who have taken me up on this. I say, as a way to get your kid to talk to you, on back to school night, I'll say, do you want to know how to get your kid to talk to you? Read the book with them. And we have quite a few copies to give one or two to a parent that's gonna send it back with their kid or drop it off in the main office. If I can get a really positive parent and kid experience to happen because of a book that I have in class, of course I will give up a copy. That's the dream. But we often have multiple copies, so if they can't find it at the local library or they can't find it on Amazon, they don't want to pay for it. You know, a copy or two here and there is not the end of the world. We have quite a comprehensive book room. I wanted to just point out one thing that we did, this was years ago. I want to say this was probably my first year as a coordinator. We knew that kids were accessing a lot of books that had difficult or challenging experiences within the text. And we wanted to provide everyone with like a protocol or a structure on how to make sure that they're okay. And so we developed this as a department with one of our consultants, Kate Roberts, who we've been working with for almost a decade now. And it's really just, you know, this is good for short stories, this is good for core novels. This was also being developed as we were thinking about social emotional learning and the new approaches with our advisory, but how can we make sure that kids are feeling comfortable in our class and let us know if something's bothering them? So we have a bunch of copies around the English department. I laminated a few so that they could live as posters within the classroom. And it's just, what's upsetting me right now? I have to name the thing, name the feeling, and then ask, where do I have to go? And sometimes it's just saying, hey, that chapter really bothered me because something bad happened to an animal. That's me as a reader. I have a really hard time if something bad happens to an animal. But do I need to like go and talk to another teacher friend? No, I probably just have to sit with that uncomfortable emotion and just say, it's a book, this is made up, bad things do happen, but I'll survive. But as teenagers, they might not have all of those coping skills, so we wanted to remind them of all of the supports that they have. You can go to the next slide. Dawn was so gracious enough to do some background research. These are possible new titles. Now, neither one of us has read. Have you read any of these
I
titles?
read most of them except for Just Until and.
She's superhuman, so
The two newest.
she's not expecting an infant in 3 weeks.
I know.
True. Yeah. She's got kids out of the house, so she has time for this, but truly, this is how this is a little insight into how we pick new books. So we listen to what the kids say, we listen to what the teachers say, we go to Dawn and we say, oh my gosh, what are the best new titles? And then we do a little bit of background research and we figure out, okay, well, I'll read Just Until, because it looks like a short read that I can get through when I'm, half asleep and sleep deprived. And then we do some reading and we figure out, does this work for this unit or does it work for something else? Because it might work in a different course, it might work in a different unit, but this is kind of how we start. We look at things that might work, do some research, do the reading, and then kind of make a decision of whether or not our kids might be interested. And it could just be having a couple copies in our classroom libraries or the library itself to say, are kids even interested in this? Because that's how it starts. Yeah, I would say it's about 60% of how the decisions happen. You can go to the next slide. And then I just wanted to just give a great shout out to Dawn, because a lot of this work cannot happen without her instinctual knowledge and her background knowledge on the professional reviews and the book review journals, because I can go to Goodreads or Amazon and look at a book review
but it might just be someone who's not that type of reader. For example, if I were to go and look at a review of a fantasy book, it could be the best fantasy book on the face of the planet. I'm not gonna wanna read it. And so if I try to read it and I give up on it and I write a review, I might not be giving enough credence to what the book is actually trying to do. So these professional resources help us to make informed decisions based on research done specifically for K through 12 schools. I don't think we make a decision without talking to Dawn, just because she has access to a variety of these reviews and journals.
And it's different than, you know, the Goodreads, the audience, it's all about the audience, and
Mhm.
these journals are intentionally reviewing for a grade level. You know, that this is like, you know, a review for a book that might be exciting for a fifth grader is gonna be a different audience for high school.
Those reviews also provide us with whether a book was nominated for an award, what kind of award, and if they did earn the award, which those things are very important to us. It's not gonna make or break, oh, this book didn't win any awards, so we can't offer it. But it's nice to know, hey, this is, the ground is rumbling, this feels important. So that's kind of like, that's the background that I might not actually do as someone who is researching the books, but I am, you know, calling Dawn and saying, hey, what's going on with this book? Is this like, tell me more about this? And she usually sends us, she'll even say, this is a new book that came out, and send us a bunch of the reviews in an email. I think this would work for this unit. And I've bought a lot of books just from her doing that, just for teachers to kind of say, I think this book might be useful in my classroom or in a unit. So,
I think the question was asked when this discussion came up at the last board meeting, like, is this gonna be hard for your department to put together a list of books that they offer? And I assured everyone, no, it's not hard at all. They are crazy readers. They read all
Yes.
the time. They have a very extensive list of what they use and what they look at. You know, definitely you can see from this slide of the titles and the offerings that we have in that unit, that there's certainly a lot of choice embedded in that. To go back to your question about, like, what if I come up with something not on the list? Even though it, you know, there is a degree of latitude that we can offer, there's also a degree of like, listen, we're all studying this thing and we're having similar conversations. So sometimes there's so much space in the unit and so many options that we will also try to coach into something that you didn't pick, and why it's important to sometimes read things that you don't love, right? Because that's part of what we're growing for the future too, is that we don't always read what we're loving, drawn to, but there is work to be done in these texts. So I'm hoping that, you know, this gave
I think it was great.
everybody an overview.
I think it's certainly more understanding is.
Yeah, so, you know, I have to give kind of everybody credit that the thoughtfulness that goes into the curriculum units by the time they get to you is just so deep and vast that it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
But sometimes these groups are working together, not only over the summer, but all during the school year on just a few units. And
But it's great to hear, you know, to,
it's deep.
1,000%. And it's
Say
so, and you know, it's so hard to truly embody what the 30,000 decisions a teacher makes within like one day in the classroom. It's hard to quantify that in an overview of a document that is so two-dimensional.
Yeah.
When so much of what we do is so three-dimensional.
And the response to
virtual
the kid, you have
dimensional.
kids in front of you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many teachers are like, I have this kid, we need to find something for him and his friend, like, that is the highest priority for the teachers.
I know.
Get a book in the kid's hand that they'll actually read.
Read, right?
You
We have to read.
Yeah,
We want them to read.
yeah.
So before we go on to the next topic, I want to make sure that you ask whatever questions you might have for Selena, because she should go to bed
You only have 3 more weeks for questions.
Every day is precious.
Otherwise, you're gonna have to wait until the end of August.
You answered all the questions.
Oh,
I
good.
think
I'm
that
glad. I'm so
It
glad.
sounds like the questions that were brought up at that meeting were all answered.
Okay, great, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you guys for listening.
It's,
And congrats. We'll see you next year.
Well, yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
That's who kicked Rick out there, so I want to make sure.
No, I'm not going anywhere. It's gonna be me and cockroaches in Madison Public School. You can't get rid of me.
it's very important to me that you understand what the questions were and the
Mhm.
concerns that came out of
Mhm.
the board meeting, what they were and what they were not,
Yes.
okay? What they were was some question about what the breadth of choices were because the sample
Mhm.
that we saw
Yes.
was particularly dark and provocative,
Mhm.
but it was not at any point in the conversation, as I understood it, an expression that those books shouldn't be there or we're concerned about that choice.
Mhm.
It was, are there other choices? Is there a
Yeah.
broader choice? And the other point that is, that is an important context of this is, okay, we appreciate that in a book club, the idea of interest and making choice is paramount.
Yes.
To what degree are students informed? What is the process that says, listen, of these choices, many of which are designed to be provocative, to be able to cultivate your being able to work with these ideas. Some of these may be particularly personal or particularly difficult. So the board was wondering, to what degree are the choices introduced
Yeah.
on the part of the teachers to say, listen, I'm gonna tell you, in this book, there's this issue of rape and other things that,
Right.
these are personal choices, so let's inform your choice.
Mhm.
That really was the extent
Of course.
of the interest, so I want you to know that this was not,
No.
wait a minute, what
Right.
kind of books are they reading?
No, not at all. And I, just from conversations and watching snippets, I never felt like, oh my gosh, we have to start over from scratch. It was just, oh, we have all of these options. They're just kind of side quests, if you will. Like they're not the most popular or the titles that we want people to know that are out there. Like these we want it to be transparent. These other titles maybe didn't need as much transparency because they don't involve the same content. But I mean, this is the end of year 11. I've never felt not supported by the board in terms of making instructional decisions, and that didn't occur during this time. It was just, oh yeah, there's 10 other minutes of my thinking that takes place that I didn't capture in an overview. So, and no one wants to live in my head with me either. So I get it. I get like you don't want to think about all the decisions I have to make, but no, I'm thank you for that transparency and thank you for that.
So good, I mean, just.
Perfect. I'm glad. I want to be I want to make sure that everyone's all on the same page, and reflecting back on that, I can see how that might not have been the case. So I'm glad I was able to course correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Now we are.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cool slideshow.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Very snappy.
Oh.
Hey, just gonna help me pronounce her last name, because it's really.
It's Paige Przbilski. I'm the media specialist at Polson.
We
Thank
are
you for inviting me in.
We are so lucky to have Paige. She is just brought so much to the district, and in a short amount of time, relatively short amount of time, but many times I go to Polson Library and I see something that she has, and I'm like, tell me about this, and it's always new and different and interesting. Paige was here, I want to say a couple of years ago, being recognized as an author as well. So she is a young adult author, as well as our library media specialist. So along those lines, she wrote a grant for what she is sharing with you this evening. So this was all kind of Paige, and her idea and her motivation and her interest in expanding our horizons. So thank you, Paige.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about virtual reality. Gail, if you want to go to the next slide. I had no idea what virtual reality was. This is all very new. But virtual reality, like a simulated 3D environment, enables users to explore virtual surrounding in a way that feels like reality through the use of headsets. Meta is one of the leading companies that bought Oculus, which creates these Quest headsets. We have been utilizing 6 Meta Quest 2 headsets that I was fortunate enough to secure with the help of the Madison Foundation. I had spoken to Catherine about previous work I had done with VR at Harborside in Milford before I came to Madison. And she really encouraged me, think about writing a grant. They're really supportive of educational ventures here. So we were able to purchase 6 of them, along with carrying cases and batteries, which we need to power the controllers. When I started talking to our students, I realized many of them are very familiar with VR headsets. They either own them at home or have a friend that they've used the headset at their house before. So instead of having to train our students in really how to use the headset, it was more like training myself and then exploring more educational apps that would align with our curriculum. I think a lot of the use at home, at least anecdotally, seems to be games that they're playing with their friends, movies that they're watching. But I really wanted to look out for educational opportunities. Especially as the media specialist, I feel like one of my main roles is really to connect students and teachers with the resources that they need, and in a differentiated way. And I thought that the VR headsets would be a good vehicle for that. So I wanted to identify educational apps that align with our curriculum. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those apps today, but there are really tons out there and they are developing new ones as we speak. So I'm always on the lookout for new ones that fold into what we're already teaching at Polson. I wanted to collaborate with teachers, talk to them about different apps that come up that might align with what they're teaching and what their objectives are. And finally, provide students with opportunities to synthesize VR experiences with their classroom learning. So not in place of classroom learning, but to really supplement what they've already started to learn about. So just a few that we've explored. The first one on that list is the Eva Core Holocaust experience. This is one that tied directly in with the Unsung Heroes unit that our 7th grade social studies department moves into in the winter every year. So that was across the entire grade level, and it was an optional experience, but it was available to all 7th graders. Flow meditation and art plunge, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I've started piloting in focus groups, I would say. I've worked with Ivana Shine, who is our school psychologist. She has groups of students that she meets with on a regular basis for various reasons, sometimes impulse control, sometimes for social reasons. So I've also tried out some apps with them as well. But the first one is the one that was across an entire grade level.
I was telling Paige earlier this evening that last night we were doing tours of Brown and there was a parent who said that her child would not leave school early because he thought he was going to be called to be the VR's headset group that would next have this experience. So she said he's just so excited about it, so I'm interested.
And we have had some absent students, which I did call down during Pride, so they do still get the experience.
Very
happy to learn with that. So this one was rated E for everyone. It's a 360-degree tour of 4 pivotal locations at Auschwitz. Survivor Eva Core shares her haunting memories of each location. So you really begin at the selection platform. It brings you into the barracks, the blood lab, and then she talks about the forgiveness project at the end of the experience. And it is Auschwitz as it is today. It's not like a simulated version of the past. And it shows her there talking about her experiences, and then there's also a voiceover that contributes information as well and photos throughout the experience. So I really began by talking to Chris Pagliuco, Art Robbins, Lindsay Wasserman about the unit and what they were trying to get out of the unit, what were the standards and the objectives. Empathy was a major one that I kept hearing repeated, reflected in our profile of a graduate as well, alternate perspectives. So we thought that unit would be a really great opportunity to include this VR experience. We sent an e-notify home to parents. This was kind of uncharted territory for us because it wasn't a field trip, but it's also more immersive in some ways than learning something from a handout or from like a standard lesson, because you really feel like you're there in a lot of ways. So we weren't really sure how to approach that, but we did want to make sure that parents were aware of it, that it was an optional experience for students who maybe emotionally didn't want to participate. That was totally okay. It was optional for everyone. There's also a slight medical component because there's a warning for the VR headsets if you have a history of seizures or if you have a pacemaker, that they do caution you medically about using a VR headset. So I spoke with our school nurse and we talked about any students that we might be concerned about, but we also wanted the parents to have that level of information as well. So we sent that out in advance. And then the students who opted in came down to the library during their social studies period. So maybe I would see I'd see 6 students at a time. So maybe while their classmates were researching, doing some independent work, I got this group of 6. And I started by providing them with the objective of the lesson, some quick instructions, because again, a lot of them have used them in the past, but in each app, the functions are going to be different. So which buttons are you pressing? What do you need to do? This one is not highly interactive in that you're not picking up objects or moving around throughout the room. This was stationary. So it was more just telling them how to start the tour and that giving them an indication of what parts, if you're not feeling emotionally comfortable with any of the material, you're always welcome to take off the headset, or you could skip over this part, head to the forgiveness part. So they really could differentiate their journey. And then I let them free in the headsets, which was so fun to watch on the outside. There's a lot of whoa at the very beginning and a lot of this, looking all around, trying to touch the ground because you really feel like you're there. Afterwards, this is my favorite part, is when we can debrief the experience together. So I started with a couple of questions that I then kind of refined throughout the process as we had more and more students providing input. I really was interested in how the VR experience augmented their learning that they had already done in the classroom. So what new learning are you taking away? And also, how does the VR component itself change your thinking? If you go to the next slide, I think these are some, so here's some photos of our students using them. There's Dr. Cook in the upper left. And then if you go to
Biggest kid in the room.
there he is. And then if you go to the next slide. This provides some of their comments. I had many students remark on how small the cattle car was at the selection platform. That was really new to them, like this idea that so many people were in such a small space. And also on the other side of that, how large the barracks were, how the bunk beds were 3 levels instead of 2, and trying to wrap their minds around the amount of people that were housed in this horrible place. So I think those are both physical components that you might not necessarily take away from a photo or from a description, right? Or you can read about it, but feeling like you're there in person changes that. I had students talk about how seeing it in color really impacted them. And a lot of interesting ethical questions arose for them. There's a part where Eva Kor talks about how to this day she's deceased at this point, she's passed away, but she was on a mission to find out what had been injected into her body during medical experimentation at Auschwitz, and they have recovered some vials that they won't test because they want to keep them as artifacts. And there was a lot of student debate about that. Well, she has a right to know what they're putting in her body. Well, we need to preserve these pieces of evidence from history because if we're testing them, then they're lost, right? So I thought that was a really interesting conversation that arose. And also I had many students comment on how humans could do this to other humans. And that for me really got kind of the heart and soul, the crux of what we were doing there with this app. Really empathizing with people and putting themselves in the shoes of people who lived not so very long ago. So for me, that was really powerful. And I think they really enjoyed it. I know it was like a very emotional experience for them. But the conversations that grew out of it were great. The teachers commented to me that either the kids couldn't wait to get down there for their turn, or they come back and were raving about the experience. So whenever I can engage students in their learning in a positive way, I feel like we've done our jobs. And then just to give you a little sneak peek into some of the other apps that you might even try later. I love this one, Flow. You can choose 4 or 8 minute guided meditation sessions in Icelandic nature scenes, which who doesn't need that, right? Some of our students who tried it out, I feel so much calmer, like I'm ready to take a nap. I'm like, yes, excellent, bringing some calm to your day. VR helps you go to different worlds. When you're having a stressed day, you can feel better. I love how the wheel in this one lets you self-select. So if you feel like you need more calm at that moment, if you need to take a breath, if you need to move your body, you can kind of choose what you currently need. And you really feel like you're there and it walks you through the entire process. So that one had really positive results, obviously. And then the last one, I haven't tried this, well, we tried this with a couple of students, but I have shown the art teachers and a few other teachers in the building, and they are blown away by this. So this is Art Plunge, where you can, and this one is this one free? This one might have been free. Step inside famous paintings and the scenes come alive around you. So you start out in this hallway. Before you, there are different masterpieces on the wall. You select one, and then you basically fall into the painting. It comes alive around you. I love the first one, girl reading a letter at an open window. Actually, if you click that link, Gail, I think it'll show you a little video. So this is where you start. So you're really in the painting, you can exit out, I think that's really most of it. Or then there's the Mona Lisa too. The amount of details that come alive for you, in that first one, just watching the wind ripple through her hair or hearing the birds that are pictured in the painting, it just brings the art alive, I think, in a totally new way. So I'd love to incorporate this more. This app does include some nudity, the birth of Venus, the creation of Adam, so I've been hesitant to roll it out to all of our middle school students. But at least those first 3, I found to be really meaningful experiences. And I'm constantly on the lookout for other apps and other moments in the curriculum that could benefit. I spoke to Christina Zaratni last week about our changing sixth grade social studies curriculum. They're really gonna be focusing on ancient civilizations. And I found a National Geographic app that lets you tour ancient Egypt and other locations. So really at this point, I'm just kind of looking for opportunities to align the VR with what we're teaching and supplementing our students' education and interest in what they're studying. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
That's so neat.
It's so fun.
Excellent. Looks like that.
And we do have the VR headset set up in room A. So once we're done with our meeting and we've closed, then board members can have the opportunity to play or relax before the board meeting.
Oh, can I mention one more librarian thing? I've also had students after the Eva Core experience say, oh, do we have any books about her in the library? And I'm like, yes, yes, that's what we're doing. We're double dipping there, or other books about unsung heroes they're studying. So then there's always crossover with the books as well.
So you could actually like go to the Museum of Natural History.
There are
Or
different
the
apps, Yes.
Metropolitan or 9/11.
memorials.
Memorials.
Yep, there are YouTube VR experiences.
Great would that be?
Yes.
There's orchestras, concerts.
Yeah,
all different
concerts,
things, yeah.
A lot of opportunities.
Oh,
I
wow.
feel like we're just at the start of it. But I also want to make sure I'm rolling it out in a way that is safe, beneficial to our students, and really tied to what they're doing. I've had a lot of students ask, can we use them during Pride? And I'm like, no, that's not really.
That's not
Playing gorilla tag with your friend is not the intention right now. But I appreciate the interest. And they're also always letting me know, they'll ask about their games that they like, Netflix, etc. But then every once in a while, one of them will mention one like, oh, I heard about this app where you can draw. Or I heard about this app where you can dissect a frog. Can you look into that, Mrs. P? So they also are giving me ideas about
Go on a
what we can
safari.
investigate. Yes,
We'll
there's.
really do that.
Okay, I will.
I will say the conversations that occurred after, because Seth and I participated in this, and there was 4 students that were right along there with us, and I think it was very thoughtfully done on your part in terms of facilitating that conversation, not just sending the students back to class. You spoke to it, but that was the real powerful piece, I thought, in terms of building that empathy and building on that opportunity. So very well done. Yeah.
Thank you. I've also talked to Chris a little bit more about what other opportunities could arise from this. Like we could even do station work afterwards based on what element of the VR engaged you most. And then students could self-select there. Opportunities for writing. There is a Anne Frank Secret Annex app where you move through Anne Frank's Secret Annex. You engage with different objects in the room that give journal snippets. You can hear the bombers going overhead, okay? But like, what a beautiful LA social studies crossover for any students who maybe read the Diary of Anne Frank and are now studying the Holocaust.
The underground.
Yes, all it depends upon really is the apps that are being developed and the age level that they're geared for, and I'm on it, but I hope they start rolling out more that are educationally based versus games. Or educational games would be fine too.
Yeah.
Well, you might have to write them yourself.
Right.
We'll see, maybe next year.
To what degree has this been shared with the larger faculty in terms of
Oh, that's a good question.
possibilities and connections to science curriculum or other curricular?
So I've been trying to touch base with people along the way as I discover apps that might be relevant, like the art teachers. That kind of happened in passing. But I am limited in terms, so we have 6 headsets, right? So in order to move through an entire class, in order to move through the whole 7th grade, that took 6 days, and I still have one class that I wasn't able to meet with. So logistically, we're trying to figure it out too. But I'd love to be able to collaborate more with other departments as well. As we move forward and as I stumble across other educational apps that might be of interest, I think there's a lot of opportunities for PE here too.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Right,
what
and the
it's just like-
movement.
Right.
But with 6, it's not like I can't take their full class for a period, you know what I mean? So we're figuring it out, and
Well,
I think the teacher response is pretty positive so
Definitely
far.
music, yeah.
Are the rest of the faculty at least aware that this is going on?
Yes, and I think as they are watching the students in them, they've been asking me, I mean, I have not presented to the faculty in like a very formal way. It's more been teachers walking by, making copies, checking out books, and they say, what are those? Or what's happening in your office right now? Or I've heard the kids talking about these headsets, what's going on? So it's been more informal. But they're aware, they seem excited about it, so I hope that I can continue making connections with them through the VR.
Great. No, thanks.
Any
I'll go around
questions?
store.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Yes, of course.
So we have anybody online? No? All right, barring any other questions, we're going to adjourn at 5:30.